There was a fancy dinner for Reform a few months ago. It was whilst I was in jail, and I knew someone, a businessman that I was talking to, that was going to that meal. It was £25,000 a ticket. Do you know the whole head table of Reform's meal with Nigel Farage, Pakistani Muslims?
There is an elephant in the room when it comes to Reform UK, Britain's likely next government, that no one in the British MSM is prepared to tackle for fear of being accused of Islamophobia or even worse, racism. And that is, of course, the Islamisation of Nigel Farage's party, which he has proudly trumpeted, even though it runs in direct contrast to his new SNP Sarah Pochin, who had the balls to say this on Talk TV in the past 24 hours.
To this country, and it is the culture of Islam who have absolutely no regard for the value of women. So these men coming in on these boats, 800 to 1,000 a week, 26,000 this year alone, have a totally different view, a medieval view.
So what is really going on with Reform and this medieval, to use Sarah Pochin's words, religion? Well, I want to fairly investigate today. What we do know as a fact is that the SAS hero, TV star Ant Middleton, who had been lined up by Reform UK to run against Sadiq Khan, or at least run against Labour's replacement for Sadiq Khan as London mayor, is now out. He will run as an independent instead, and has already secured the endorsement of Tommy Robinson right here on Outspoken last week. Meanwhile, Tim Shipman of the establishment Spectator has revealed that Reform is lining up Layla Cunningham to be their candidate to succeed Khan. The former Tory, and remember she was a Tory up until very, very recently, revealed this morning on GB News that she is indeed a practicing Muslim.
They've never had a woman mayor of London.
No, I will support anyone who can beat Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, and you're a Muslim too, aren't you?
I am.
Are you a practicing Muslim?
I am.
Interesting.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining.
Now look, does that matter? That's the question. Nigel Farage, who has always been desperate to shut down a far-right label, says absolutely not. His recruitment of a Muslim chairman and Zia Yusuf was strategic, and despite the bloke being an absolute monster of a human being, with a very shady past, Yusuf has been given full power in the party even after he quit in a huff. That's because Farage now argues that winning the Muslim vote is now a political necessity in the UK.
We have a Muslim population in Britain growing by about 75% every 10 years. Right? That's just where we are.
Mm-hmm.
If we politically alienate the whole of Islam, we will lose. We'll lose.
So how does one include
We
them?
will lose.
And to appease that Muslim vote and the Islamists who control much of the narrative of the MSM today, Farage has gone much further, even ruling out mass deportations altogether and saying he has no issue with the growing scourge of anti-white racism in Britain.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it. At the moment, it's a political impossibility.
But is it your ambition?
No. No, I'm not going to get dragged down the route of mass deportations or anything like that. I mean, people are always going to come and go, and we are a country that's engaged in international trade, and we have relationships around the world through the Commonwealth, etc. But yeah, we have to aim at a balanced migration policy.
But net zero still means hundreds of thousands of people coming into Britain, immigrants coming into Britain. Isn't that too many?
It may well be, but we have to start somewhere.
Trump says in America that he wants mass deportations. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are in Britain at the moment. Some estimates say the number could even be in, 1 million plus. So do you support deporting all of those people?
It's impossible to do. Literally impossible to do.
In terms of the atmosphere in Britain, are you concerned that there is a rising level of anti-white hatred?
I'm just concerned about a deeply divided society.
But increasingly, Farage appears to be at war with his own party and his own base. Because while he's dismissed, as you can see there, the idea of mass deportations and remigration as an obsession of the so-called online right, so too has his deputy Richard Tice, his MPs, and let's be honest, there's not many of them after he booted Rupert Lowe for being too extreme, extreme. Well, they're increasingly ignoring his moderate message, as Pochen herself made clear at yesterday's Reform Women's press conference. Can you believe that more than half of you are watching this video but not subscribed? So please do me a huge favour, click the subscribe button now, turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to all of our brand new Outspoken videos.
A Reform government will stop this betrayal of our women and girls. We will deport every illegal immigrant that sets foot on our shores. We will deport all illegal immigrants housed in hotels up and down this country. We will do everything we can to ensure that those dispersed in the HMOs are found and deported. We will deport all foreign national offenders in our prisons, ensuring that when they do get out, they are not free to walk on our streets. We will instruct our police to respond to every inappropriate sexual behaviour call by migrants against our women and girls. We will empower our Immigration Enforcement Division to detain them, to deport them, to raid town centre businesses along the way. And of course, we have to, and Reform will, leave the ECHR and put an end to the lucrative merry-go-round of human rights-based appeals. We will stop this madness. It is a matter of national security, and only a Reform government will protect women. Thank you.
Then you throw Jeremy Robinson into the mix, who post his release from HMP Woodhill has reversed his quiet support of Reform UK by openly criticising the party's appeasement of Islam and actively backing Ben Habib's rival Advance UK party. He posted about this: what happens when we shy away from conversations about forced demographic change, the erosion of British culture and the takeover of Islam? What happens when politicians fail to bring about real change and legislate for the British people? What happens when you shame, persecute, prosecute, silence and denigrate patriotic Brits for the crime of loving their country and knowing the problems we face? You get this. Autistic kid brainwashed by neo-Nazis and their sick ideology planned a terror attack at a mosque after converting to Islam to gain access. Notepads containing swastikas were also recovered before officers later found a copy of Hitler's book Mein Kampf, knives and ingredients for explosive substances at his house. And in his most explosive interview ever with me here on Outspoken last Friday, Tommy also spelled out new issues of how reform is becoming increasingly intertwined with Islam.
The country's primed and ready for populist revolution politically, and we get a party that betray and go back on everything. And not just that. How are you going to tackle the Islamisation of this country? Some people don't want to hear this. With a Muslim chairman of your party. Do you think Marie Le Pen would have a Muslim chairman of her party in France? Do you think Geert Wilders would? Do you think any of the leading, do you think the AFD, Alternative for Deutschland, who want remigration, who won 21% of the vote, do you think they would? The Swedish Democrats, when I started activism, were on 1%, they're now on 24%, yeah? They're not got Muslim leaders, right? Because they've got to tackle the Islamisation. And they've got to do things to do that. And at the minute, there was a fancy dinner for Reform a few months ago. It was whilst I was in jail, and I knew someone, a businessman that I was talking to, that was going to that meal. It was £25,000 a ticket. Do you know the whole head table of Reform's meal with Nigel Farage? Pakistani Muslims. So I'm sorry, but didn't they just take £1 million yesterday from a World Economic Forum Muslim? Yeah, it's like you can't Nigel flip-flop Farage. He changes on everything.
But this is not an issue you would dare hear the cut and controlled GB News or Talk TV and its anti-Tommy presenters like Camilla Tominay, who's still going on about how he's a white supremacist, even daring to touch, let alone right-wing publications, or shall I say so-called right-wing publications like the Daily Telegraph and The Sun, which have long decided that the idea that Islam is not compatible with our way of life is just not a commercially palatable message for them. So it has been left to our far braver American friends to talk about the Islamification of Reform UK, as Connor Tomlinson did beautifully while appearing on the independent US broadcast Timcast in a segment that has now gone
You have Reform.
viral.
Reform are topping the polls. That's Nigel Farage's party. Nigel Farage, about 2 days ago, gave an interview saying, I am to the left of the country on immigration. Yeah, I know.
What?
Most Americans don't know this. Nigel Farage has spent the last year betraying his base, entirely betraying them. He has said mass deportations are an impossibility. We're not going to do them, even after Trump won on them.
Wow.
He turned around and said there are clips of this you'll be able to get. You had Winston Marshall on a few weeks ago. On Winston Marshall's podcast, he said, if politically we alienate Islam, by 2050 we will lose.
I saw that, yeah.
Like, sorry, Nigel, what parts of Islamic theology do you want to incorporate into your party platform? What is winning? Now, it turns out that his company is his party is a company. He's got two directors. One is Nigel Farage. One is his former party chairman called Zia Yusuf. Zia Yusuf gave probably about £200,000 in political donations when the party was about to win the election. He's been Nigel's vizier ever since. He's kind of like Jafar from Aladdin. He left the party. He insulted the party. 2 days later, he was brought back in as the head of UK Doge, and he is now personally appointing loads of Muslim candidates to this party, which is topping the polls because it's meant to be the anti-immigration party. So we genuinely have nobody to vote for.
The Overton window is moving so fast in so many directions as slippery Starmer drives the UK into the ground. And I think for a populist party of the right, like Reform UK, to simply pretend there is no issue with an Islam takeover of our disunited kingdom appears naive at best, deeply irresponsible, and unpatriotic at worst. And Connor Tomlinson is here now to elaborate. But first, as I've entered my 40s, aging has become ever-present in my life. My body doesn't back up the way it used to, and I've found that it's far easier to get injured when trying to work out, far harder to recover too. But I believe one of the best aging breakthroughs of the last decade is qualia senolytic. And I'm going to explain why. Senolytics are a science field revolutionizing human aging. A big culprit behind that middle-aged feeling can be so-called zombie cells that linger in your body after their useful function, wasting your energy and resources. Now, those zombie cells can lead to less energy, slower workout recovery, joint discomfort, and basically feeling old. Now, qualia senolytic is a groundbreaking, clinically tested supplement with 9 vegan plant-derived compounds that help your body naturally eliminate these zombie cells, helping you feel years younger in just months. But here's what I absolutely love about this product. You take it just 2 days a month, helping your body naturally eliminate zombie cells to age better at the cellular level. Now, since taking qualia senolytic, I've felt like I've turned back the clock. I have higher energy, less soreness after exercise, and a big boost in productivity too. That all equals feeling so much better. So experience the science of feeling younger by going to qualialife.com/Dan for up to 50% off your purchase. Use the code DAN, that's DAN, for an additional 15%. So that's QUALIA life.com/Dan for an extra 15% off your purchase. Your older self will thank you. And by the way, thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode. Now, let's get back to it. That clip from your Timcast interview has gone viral, but it's very telling that this is simply a discussion that isn't had in the mainstream media in the UK.
Yeah.
Reform's
links to Islam are just considered off limits.
Unfortunately, Dan, it's because for decades, the broadcast media have, ever since 1997 and the Runnymede Trust introduced the Muslim Brotherhood's term Islamophobia into British discourse. The term was invented by the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, to give Islam protection equivalent to gay rights activists and Jews after the Holocaust, with phrases like anti-Semitism and homophobia. Ever since that word has been introduced into British discourse, British broadcasters and politicians have kind of bought the Muslim line that there is one great Muslim race, and so criticism of Islam is racism, and therefore you haven't been able to touch it with a barge pole, despite its increased, innocuous, seemingly, but actually quite noxious presence in our politics that I've discussed time and time again, with
things like the 700-strong Muslim network in the Home Office, many members of whom have gone to school with ISIS members and find it funny. One of them was recently prosecuted for taking bribes to overturn rejected asylum applications from Muslim countries like Bangladesh. Another one rejected a Christian asylum seeker because she fabricated government documents and said that even though she was fleeing forced conversion, her country of origin was hospitable to Christians. There's a clear ethnic and religious loyalty by Muslims in positions of power, in the intelligence services, in the civil service, in the government, and in Parliament, that we are just not allowed to criticise. Otherwise, you're painted as a bogeyman like Tommy Robinson was for multiple decades, and now even the lads at Trigonometry are realising, hey, he was right about a lot of this stuff. So it's pretty unfortunate, actually, that Reform UK have, when the public themselves have decided, 53% of them think that Islam is not compatible with British values, that Reform UK have decided to go for a carrot and stick electoral approach. Let's be fair with this, in thinking that they need to appoint moderate Muslims as their kind of vanguard to try and win over the Muslim vote, while also every time they upset their base, coming out with something a little bit more right-wing to try and quell them. Perfect example of this is, as you played with Nigel Farage denouncing mass deportations last year, well, at the most recent crime press conference, he said, no, we're sending every single Afghan back, after a lot of pressure has been put on him by who were previously disregarded as the very online right to enact the policy of mass deportations, which overwhelmingly 99% of their supporters support, after Reform's internal staff waved the smelling salts of social media under Farage's very liberal nose. They've now come out and said, yeah, we will actually deport every single illegal migrant. And so actually, Dan, I think what's going to happen is they're going to put themselves in a very difficult corner where they've now been appointing Muslim donors, former Muslim chairman and head of UK Doge, possibly Leda Cunningham as their mayoral candidate, but they're not going to be able to back off from the fact that the patriotic white British host majority are sceptical and are outright hostile towards Islam at this point.
What do you make of the fact that the candidate who seems to have been handpicked to run for London mayor is a practicing Muslim, as she revealed on GB News this morning? Does it matter?
It of course matters, and it matters for the reason of not being able to have a guaranteed shared moral framework with the party that you choose to represent you. I didn't like when Rishi Sunak celebrated Diwali in 10 Downing Street, because if you run Hinduism and its principles out through politics, you get India. And I don't want to live in India, I want to live in England. In the same way that if you run Islam and its most doctrinal and devout interpretations out, as seen in Sharia law, you don't get England, you get Iraq, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iran. Take your pick of all of these undesirable countries that are punitive to women, as the women press conference that Reform convened pointed out, but also just inhospitable to how an Englishman and a Christian would like to live his life. And so I'll go through the incompatibilities of Islam and English Christianity in a moment, but the problem Reform now have is that their entire voter base are wondering who gets the rug pulled out from under them. Is this a clever ploy, as Majid Nawaz said on Winston Marshall's podcast, for Reform to win the moderate Muslim vote because they think it's necessary, because in certain areas, including London, across the country, the ethno-religious enclaves that have been imported into this country will only vote for someone who looks like them and shares their same religion. And as soon as these Muslim leaders get in, we find out that they've just been lying the entire time. They're not actually practicing Muslims. They're about as Muslim as a ham sandwich, as someone once said to me about Zia Yusuf, who has knowledge of the matter, and they just don't want to announce this because they'll be killed for apostasy, and suddenly they do everything we want them to do. Or is the rug going to be pulled out from the white British host majority, who are not going to be represented by someone who, when it comes to time to dismantle the Home Office Islamic network, goes, well, as a Muslim, I feel quite uncomfortable doing that. I feel quite uncomfortable shutting the doors to Muslim countries with an immigration red list. And so, a bit like a vegan at a barbecue, one person will change the entire way that everyone else eats. One Muslim in the party, multiple Muslims in the party, will suddenly soften Reform's stance towards Islam just as criticism begins to build towards it. And the reasons that Islam is totally incompatible with the way that we live, Dan, is the practice of cousin marriage, which is ubiquitous across the Muslim world, between 40 and 90%, still up to 90% in some areas of Bradford in this country, which entrenches this clannish morality, this asabaya, which means that they don't see people outside of the family, clan, and Islamic faith as worthy of equal moral consideration. This is why the grooming gangs and their families said nothing, according to the head of the Ramadan Foundation in 2016, about their brothers, cousins, fathers, and sons' crimes because they, quote, didn't want to be seen as siding with the white enemy. In Sharia law, women's testimony is only worth 1/3 of that of a man. There is no such thing as marital rape, so it's a bit difficult to be platforming practicing Muslims while also concerning yourself with immigration and migrant sex crime being a threat to women and children. Frankly, if you play all these principles out, England will become unrecognisable, culturally and demographically disfigured, and that is just not what people are voting for when they vote for Reform UK.
And don't we have a right to talk to these candidates about their religion, whereas it seems to be off limits? I'll give you an example from just this month. Zia Yusuf did a big feature interview with the Financial Times. And now this is a guy, he's got the mouth from the south, right? He doesn't shut up for one day. He's constantly PRing himself, making it very clear he wants to be the next chancellor and is currently lobbying to run in the next by-election that comes up. Although I will tell you there were some Reform donors who are very opposed to that. But in this interview, in the FT, Connor, he's asked about his Muslim faith, specifically whether he is a practicing Muslim. He refused to elaborate on the details of his religious practice. A relevant excerpt from the article states, although Yusuf describes himself as a Muslim, when I ask if he is practicing, he says his faith is quite personal and he would prefer not to say. Now, this is the tactic, Connor, you will notice, was also used by Humza Useless when he was the First Minister of Scotland. I'm not going to talk about it. It's irrelevant. I'm not going to go into the details. Now, that he's no longer the First Minister of Scotland, we know he's an extremist, this guy. So why is Zia Yusuf not prepared to speak about his faith? Because let me tell you, Connor, as a gay man, I want to know if Zia Yusuf believes I should be thrown off the top of a building. And I'm sure there's a lot of women who would want to know how he views the female role in modern British life, given his religion.
Yeah, well, in the Hadiths, it says that the people of Lot, people who enjoy the company of people of the same sex, should be killed. So, yeah, I imagine it's quite pertinent to you, Dan. I think one of the reasons why Zia Yusuf might not want to say this, and again, I would like to just say that I think Zia Yusuf is a moral disgrace, given he was happier to see Rupert Lowe sit in prison on false charges than be able to criticise Nigel Farage, because he was a threat to the throne that Zia Yusuf clearly covets. But I wonder, actually, if Zia Yusuf is staying quiet about his so-called Muslim faith because he's not actually that devout and practicing a Muslim. But by saying this, one, it sabotages what Reform thinks is an electoral strategy. I actually think it's a major electoral liability, like it wasn't 10 years ago, back when Farage quit UKIP because he said that Tommy Robinson was involved and was obsessed with Muslims. Actually, turns out the British public themselves are quite sceptical of Islam, and so you'd actually win more votes by promising to clamp down hard on this alien ideology that has taken root in our country. But also, I wonder if Zia Yusuf has, as a high-profile man of Muslim heritage, genuine security concerns because apostasy is punishable by death. So I kind of don't blame him for being evasive about it, but this creates two problems. One, again, Reform have talked themselves into a corner by touting him as a patriotic British Muslim when, frankly, you cannot be British, culturally at least, and a Muslim, because the two traditions are completely incompatible. And two, well, I must say that I don't think they're going to win over as many Muslims as they think, and so by alienating their core voters and also trying to snap up a constituency that are more likely to vote for Jezbollah or the Fruit and Nut Party, depending on what Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn call it, I think they've actually lost more voters than they potentially will have gained, especially as the issue becomes a lot more salient. And thirdly, if I may, Reform shouldn't be in the position where they're answering these questions in the first place. There's always the concern about taqiyya, which is the principle in Islam that Muslims can just lie to advance the cause of Islam if they're in a land of unbelievers. It's very different to Judaism and Christianity, where it says that, you know, obey the law of the land, whereas keep your religion, do not renounce it, and privately practice where you can. And so even if Yusuf himself is not a devout Muslim and is not practicing taqiyya, so to speak, the fact that people are questioning this shows how disastrous a strategy it was to make Muslim candidates your faces of your party.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.